Have you ever thought about what would motivational speakers say to Job of the Bible? I'm sure you probably haven't thought of that, but hey, let's think about that for a second. Motivational speakers love to say, you are responsible for everything in your life and you can't blame other people. If something bad happens, they say you need to look at yourself. You've caused it. Well, did Job cause all those bad things that happened to him? No, not necessarily. And I think a fundamental problem here is this. Oftentimes in life, we mix up the battles in the war. A lot of people win battles, but they lose the war of life. A lot of people lose battles in life, but they win the war. All that matters is what happens in the end. As a whole, if you have won the war of life, that's all that matters. If, on the other hand, as a whole, you have lost the war of life, that's all that matters. Take, for example, O.J. Simpson. Motivational speakers have praised O.J. Simpson. If you get motivational books from the 80s or early 90s, they will say how great O.J. Simpson is. After all, he became a great star from nothing. So he's someone we should admire, right? Well, it would come out later that O.J. Simpson wasn't such a great person after all. He did succeed in one area, but he didn't succeed in another area. Fortunately, there are motivational speakers who say it does matter as a whole. Success, if you just have it in one area of life, is not as virtuous as if you have it in every area. I listened to some of Zig Ziglar say this, for example. With motivational speaking, I love to hear it. I think it is great. I am not going to swallow it uncritically, and that's why we need to look at the case of Job. So don't be so quick to point your finger at someone who is having difficulty in life. Certainly, there are many people who are bringing things on to themselves. We don't always know when people are bringing it on to themselves and when they're not. I think we can know if we have wisdom and discernment. That takes great experience. A lot of people will point their finger at someone and say, hey, that's failing. You're failing, but in the end, it's going to end up successful. And that's what matters in the end. People pointing their finger at Job and said, hey, your life is a failure. It's a mess. After all, we are responsible for everything in our lives, right? I don't think absolutely everything. Many things, yes. A whole lot of things. Tons of choices. Tons of options we have. All day long we have options and choices to make. Still, there are things we are not responsible for. So I believe it is important to look at it this way. Calvinist R.C. Sproul put it very well when he said, there's not a one-to-one ratio between suffering and sin. He admitted that sometimes we bring it on, and indeed that isn't the case. We need to look at ourselves, but it's not one-to-one in every single case. I believe motivational speakers do make that error too much of the time. They're big on personal responsibility. Indeed, probably most of the world needs to take personal responsibility. Yet, we also need to realize sometimes people are not suffering because they're doing something wrong, but just because. It may be they're suffering to get something better in the long run. Like Job. Job won the war of life. He lived life very well. He won in the end. It doesn't matter if you lose the battles, as long as you win the war. And let us not praise people who have success real soon. After all, they may end up as tomorrow's O.J. Simpson or Jerry Sandusky. Jerry Sandusky and O.J. Simpson both succeeded in the game of football, but in the game of life, they lost big time. So let's not be so quick to praise people who, just because they're winning battles. Let's praise people who win wars. And sometimes you got to wait a whole long time to realize who's going to win and who's not going to win. We don't see everything right away. All that matters is what God, Providence, the universe, whatever you want to call it, sees. It sees it all. All that matters is if you win the war.